Now, yeah, I mean, I just cannot imagine my life without him. I mean,
That's
he's
so
the most
great.
amazing thing that ever happened to me.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Great.
And importantly, I really felt better. And once I knew I felt better, then it was just easy to stick to.
For decades, Simon Cowell built his brand on tough love and biting honesty. But no one could have predicted the moment that broke him. It wasn't a career milestone or a record-breaking show. It was his young son, Eric, stepping into a spotlight Simon never imagined. What Eric revealed to the world shook Simon to his core, forcing him to confront emotions he rarely shows. What exactly did Eric do? And why is Simon crying on his unexpected transformation? The answer is as surprising as it is touching. Simon Philip Cowell was born on October 7, 1959, in Lambeth, London, into a family that seemed destined for the entertainment industry. His father, Eric Cowell, was a respected music executive at EMI, while his mother, Julie, was a ballet dancer. Simon grew up surrounded by the arts, but he was far from the picture of an obedient, studious child. In fact, Simon had a knack for causing trouble. School didn't interest him, and his rebellious streak led to several expulsions. By 16, Simon dropped out altogether, leaving his parents deeply frustrated. But what happened next was unexpected. At the age of 20, Simon landed a job at EMI, starting from the very bottom as a mailroom clerk. This wasn't the glamorous start one might expect for someone with family ties in the industry, but Simon was determined to make something of himself. Sorting mail and delivering packages didn't seem like much, but it gave Simon something priceless, a peek behind the curtain of the music business. He secretly read confidential memos, absorbing everything he could about how deals were made and artists were managed. Still, the climb to success wasn't smooth. By 1985, frustrated with his lack of progress at EMI, Simon left to start his own venture, E&S Music. It flopped within 18 months. Undeterred, he co-founded Fanfare Records, which showed early promise with hits like Sinita's So Macho. For a brief moment, Simon tasted success. But in a shocking turn of events, Fanfare Records went bankrupt in 1989, leaving Simon nearly £400,000 in debt. At 30, Simon had no choice but to move back in with his parents. The humiliation was palpable, but so was his resolve. He later called this period the fuel that ignited his ambition. The turning point came in 2001. Simon was asked to judge a new show, Pop Idol. On screen, his brutally honest critiques and sharp wit made him a sensation. He wasn't afraid to say what others wouldn't, and audiences loved him, or loved to hate him. By 2002, American Idol took him to the global stage. When the show's finale attracted a staggering 50 million viewers in the US alone, Simon was no longer just a judge, he was a star. His $33 million per season salary cemented his status as one of television's most influential figures. But Simon wasn't content with fame. He wanted to build something lasting. In 2003, he launched Psycho Entertainment, combining music, television, and film under one umbrella. This wasn't just a business. It was a platform for discovering and nurturing talent. And it worked. One Direction, Little Mix, Susan Boyle, all launched by Psycho, became international superstars. Artists from his shows sold over 500 million records, with 250 #1 hits. Meanwhile, his romantic adventures were on full swing, too. One of his longest and most complicated relationships was with pop singer Sinita. They met in 1984, when Simon signed her to his record label, and what followed was a 2-decade roller coaster of romance and friendship. Even after their romantic ties ended, Sinita remained a fixture in his life. She vacationed with him in Barbados, joined him on red carpets, and stood by his side through his meteoric rise. But their history wasn't without its darker moments. Sunita once revealed that she'd made the heart-wrenching decision to abort Simon's baby in the late 1980s. It was a choice they made together, but it left scars that never truly healed. Simon's relationships weren't just long-lasting, they were lavish. When he dated TV presenter Terry Seymour in the early 2000s, their love story was filled with private jets and extravagant gifts. When they eventually parted ways in 2008, Simon gave her a $4.6 million Beverly Hills mansion as a breakup present. But what made Simon's bachelor years truly infamous was his open disdain for marriage and fatherhood. In interviews, he declared, "I don't want to marry anyone because whoever marries me will end up hating me." When it came to kids, he didn't mince words either. He once told Oprah, "I don't want kids. They're a huge responsibility. I'd go nuts." His views were rooted in his deep understanding of himself. He admitted he loved his freedom too much. Kids, he said, came with routines, early mornings, constant attention, things he just couldn't see fitting into his life. He even joked, "All I'd want to do is sit in a corner and think." By the time Simon turned 50, his image as the eternal bachelor was set in stone. However, his life changed forever in 2004 when he met Lauren Silverman at the Sandy Lane Resort in Barbados. She was there on vacation with her husband, Andrew Silverman, a real estate mogul who quickly became Simon's friend. On the surface, everything seemed ordinary: a casual friendship, shared laughs, and sunny days in paradise. But beneath the surface, Simon and Lauren were drawn to each other in ways neither could have predicted. For years, nothing outwardly happened between them. Simon dated other women, including Terry Seymour, and even became engaged to Mejgan Husseini in 2010. Meanwhile, Lauren remained in her marriage. But sometimes, paths cross again, and what was once dormant sparks to life. That's exactly what happened. In July 2013, the world exploded with a headline no one saw coming. Lauren was pregnant, with Simon Cowell's child. The news wasn't just surprising, it was scandalous. Lauren was still married to Andrew, and now the truth about their affair was out in the open. Andrew didn't take it lightly. He filed for divorce, citing adultery, and Simon was named directly in the case. The media went wild. It got worse. As part of the divorce settlement, Simon was barred from being around Andrew and Lauren's 7-year-old son, Adam. If he violated this agreement, he'd face a $50,000 fine every single time. For someone like Simon, used to calling the shots, it was a harsh wake-up call. But then came the real shock. Lauren's pregnancy wasn't planned. Doctors had told her she couldn't conceive again, so protection hadn't seemed necessary. Suddenly, the man who once swore he'd never have children was about to become a father. At first, Simon didn't know what to think. He'd spent his entire life saying he wasn't cut out for marriage or kids. He'd even joked about leaving his fortune to his dogs. But life doesn't care about your plans. On February 14th, 2014, Simon was immersed in the chaos of Britain's Got Talent auditions in London. But everything came to a halt when the call came through. Lauren Silverman was in labor in New York. For a man who thrived on planning and control, this moment was pure chaos. Simon left the auditions abruptly. He boarded a private jet at Luton Airport, embarking on a grueling 8-hour flight across the Atlantic. Every minute felt like a race against time. Would he make it? Would he get there before his son was born? The suspense mirrored the tension of his own shows, but this time it was personal. When he finally arrived at the hospital, there was barely time to catch his breath. Just 2 hours later, Eric entered the world, healthy and perfect. The man who had built his life on wit, criticism, and a sharp tongue suddenly found himself lost in the overwhelming love he felt for his son. "I never knew I could feel like this," he said later, his voice filled with a rare softness. But the surprises didn't end there. Simon and Lauren chose a name that carried deep meaning: Eric Philip Cowell. It was a tribute to Simon's late father, who had been a guiding force in his life. Naming his son after him was a way to honor the man who had shaped his journey. 3 days after Eric's birth, Simon shared the first glimpse of his son with the world. The photos were simple: black and white shots of Simon cradling the tiny newborn in his arms. Yet, they carried an emotional weight that captivated everyone. The world was used to seeing Cowell as a sharp-edged TV personality, but here he was, vulnerable and visibly smitten with his child. The images went viral within hours, drawing over 200,000 likes and a flood of congratulatory messages. By August 2014, Eric made his first big public appearance at the premiere of One Direction, This Is Us, in London. Dressed in a miniature version of his father's signature look, a crisp white shirt and black trousers, Eric charmed everyone in sight. Fans couldn't get enough, and the moment only deepened the public's fascination with Simon's new role as a father. Simon's life underwent a complete transformation. Once a self-proclaimed workaholic, Simon had spent 99% of his time consumed by his career, often working through the night and waking in the afternoon. But with Eric in his life, priorities shifted. Simon surprised everyone when he declared Fridays completely off-limits for work. Evenings became sacred, with dinners at 5 o'clock and no calls or emails after 5:30 p.m. "I realized what really mattered," he said, reflecting on how Eric had reshaped his world. This newfound perspective began to seep into Simon's public life, too. The once feared judge, known for his brutal honesty, began showing a gentler side. During a touching moment on America's Got Talent in 2022, Eric joined him on stage. As his young son interacted with contestants, Simon wiped away tears, a sight nobody expected from the famously stoic critic. His approach to judging also softened. Instead of tearing performers down, he started focusing on their strengths. Eric's influence didn't stop at his father's demeanor. He took on a unique role as Simon's little cigarette police. Simon, who once smoked up to 80 cigarettes a day, found himself under the watchful eye of his young son. Eric would follow him around, limiting him to 1 puff at a time. Simon's friend Sunita revealed, "Eric takes it seriously. He always says, 'How many puffs, Daddy?' It's hilarious." Simon often joked that sneaking a puff behind bushes felt like being back in school, with Eric playing the role of teacher. But it worked. Simon's cigarette habit reduced to just 1 or 2 a day, and eventually he quit altogether. "I haven't had a cigarette in weeks," Simon proudly shared in a recent interview. The journey was tough, but Eric's persistence pushed him through. Simon even overhauled his diet, cutting out red meat, sugar, dairy, and gluten, all for the sake of keeping up with his energetic son. "I realized if I didn't sort myself out, I wouldn't be able to catch up with him," he explained. Simon summed it up simply: "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." Eric had grown up watching his father dominate the judging world, often sitting alongside him at tapings and charming audiences with his unfiltered reactions. But no one, not even Simon, saw this coming. It all began innocently. Eric, at just 10 years old, started showing a deep interest in music. His love for bands like Green Day was more than just a phase. He'd taken up drumming and was surprisingly good at it. Simon often joked about Eric's talent, saying, At least it's drums and not a violin. He's in rhythm, he's in time, and thank God for that. But when Eric declared he wanted to audition for Britain's Got Talent, Simon's world flipped. The announcement came one evening, casually delivered over dinner. "I want to audition for your show," Eric said confidently. Simon, who had spent decades critiquing performers, was left speechless. "You're serious?" he asked, to which Eric nodded, a determination in his eyes that Simon knew all too well. It was the same look he had when building his entertainment empire. Simon's initial reaction was mixed. He felt immense pride, but also a wave of anxiety. He confessed in an interview, "This is going to be torture. Of all the things I've ever done, watching Eric perform will probably be the hardest." For someone known for his blunt honesty, the thought of critiquing his own son terrified him. Eric wasn't just preparing for a fun performance. He was serious. Simon admitted that his son's dedication caught him off guard. "He's really into it," Simon shared. "He wants to do this right." It wasn't just about impressing the judges. Eric wanted to prove himself, to step out of his father's shadow and show the world what he could do. As the audition day approached, the entertainment world buzzed with speculation. What would Eric perform? Would Simon go easy on him? How would the other judges react to Simon's son on stage? Cameras followed Simon and Eric's every move, turning the lead-up into a spectacle all its own. The night before the big day, Simon found himself sitting with Eric in the living room, offering advice that was part fatherly wisdom and part showbiz veteran. "Just have fun," Simon said, though his own nerves betrayed him. "And remember, it's not about what I think. It's about what you feel when you're up there." Eric smiled, his confidence unwavering. "I know, Dad. I'm ready." On a cool Saturday night in April 2024, a moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. Eric Cowell, just 10 years old, walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage. The world was watching, but it was his father, Simon Cowell, who mattered the most. As the lights hit him, the room went silent. Eric stood there, dressed in a smaller version of Simon's classic white shirt and black trousers. His voice was clear and steady when he said, "I'm Eric Cowell, and I'm here to rock your world." Then the music began. Eric started with a drum solo. His rhythm was sharp, each beat landing perfectly. Suddenly, he switched to singing. He performed Green Day's Boulevard of Broken Dreams. His voice was young, but filled with emotion, capturing the crowd's attention. For 2.5 minutes, the audience didn't blink. As he finished, the room exploded in applause. Eric stood still, breathing hard, his face a mix of excitement and relief as he waited for the judges to speak. The cameras kept focusing on Simon during the performance. At first, he sat stiffly, watching closely, his face serious. But as Eric started singing, his eyes filled with tears. By the time Eric hit the chorus, Simon was crying. This was the man known for his tough critiques, breaking down in front of millions. As Eric ended his song, Simon stood up, clapping so hard his hands shook. Then he walked onto the stage. The crowd roared louder as Simon hugged his son tightly, his shoulders shaking as he cried. It was a moment no one watching would forget. When the judges finally spoke, Simon could barely get the words out. His voice was unsteady as he said, "Eric, I'm so proud of you. You've made me happier than I ever thought I could be." Later that evening, Simon and Eric sat together for an exclusive post-performance interview, broadcasted live on television. Eric, still dressed in his stage outfit, was asked what inspired him to perform. "I just wanted to make my dad proud," Eric said simply, glancing up at Simon with a wide grin. Simon, visibly moved, looked away for a moment to compose himself before replying, "You didn't just make me proud, you made me the proudest dad in the world." But the real shock came a week later when Simon made a surprise announcement. For the first time in the show's history, he was stepping down from judging a round of auditions to ensure fairness for Eric. He explained, "I've built this show on integrity, and I want to make sure Eric earns his place like every other contestant. No special treatment." 2 nights before Eric's next performance, Simon found him quietly rehearsing in their living room. He was drumming softly on the armrest of the couch, humming to himself. Simon sat down beside him, watching in silence. "Nervous?" Simon finally asked. Eric shrugged. "A little. But you're always nervous, right? You just don't show it." Simon laughed, surprised by his son's observation. "You're right," he admitted. "But here's the secret. It's the nerves that keep you sharp." One of the most challenging aspects of raising a child in the spotlight is maintaining a sense of normalcy, and Cowell has been surprisingly adept at navigating this delicate balance. Despite Eric's growing interest in the entertainment industry, Cowell has made concerted efforts to ensure his son experiences a well-rounded childhood. In a shocking revelation during an interview with Hello magazine in 2024, Cowell admitted to implementing strict rules about Eric's exposure to the media. "We have a no red carpet policy for Eric," Cowell stated. "I want him to be a kid first and foremost." This decision has raised eyebrows in Hollywood, where celebrity children are often fixtures at high-profile events. Cowell's commitment to providing Eric with a normal childhood extends beyond shielding him from the media. In an unexpected move, Cowell relocated his family from their £45 million London mansion to a country house in the Cotswolds in August 2023. This drastic change in lifestyle was driven by Cowell's desire to give Eric a more grounded upbringing. "I wanted Eric to grow up climbing trees and playing in the mud, not just surrounded by concrete and paparazzi," Cowell explained to The Sun. However, this move to the countryside hasn't been without its challenges. In a humorous turn of events, Cowell's idyllic rural retreat has been invaded by moles, transforming his once pristine 8-acre property into what has been described as Swiss cheese. This unexpected battle with nature adds a touch of relatability to Cowell's parenting journey, showing that even media moguls aren't immune to the quirks of rural living.